All right, it is January 23rd, 2024. This is Dave Glover. I'm here with Bob Muenz. And Bob, I feel like we're already friends. We've been talking for a few minutes already. I know a lot about you. So like any good interviewer or therapist, let's start with your childhood. So you're 80 years old. I'm about to turn 60. So you were born 44?
43.
43?
Yeah.
You ever think about it this way, that you and I, everyone has their challenges in childhood, good parents, bad parents. But as far as the construct of childhood, you and I got really lucky. Our parents, depression, World War II, probably didn't have much of a childhood. My kids didn't, because I was hovering over them all the time, didn't let them go run like we did. We had a kind of a golden time to be a kid, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. It was a great time to be growing up, and in the late 40s. I mean, I don't remember much about the late 40s, but the 50s I remember quite a bit about it. And it was very special, and it was pretty much like a Leave It to Beaver life. I mean, that was about the worst that could happen, was about the worst that ever happened on that TV show.
Get in some trouble, get out of it with your buddies.
Exactly, yeah, and sneak around, and, you smoke a cigarette in the back of the garage, or in the or in the bathroom of the high school. That was the best place to do it.
Yeah,
and everybody knew you were doing it. So
yeah, So I've always wondered about that, because I grew up watching those shows.
Yeah,
and wondering, is this just fiction, or did people really live this way? And just the 50s and the cars and post-World War II, and everyone seemed happy, and Sandlot baseball and the whole bit. So that's kind of how it was for you.
I think so, and it's strange. I like to watch the movie The Christmas Story every Christmas, and it's amazing how many of those things that happen in that movie, particularly the BB gun story, your tongue getting stuck on the light post, and being dressed up so with so many clothes you can't move. I mean, it was those kind of things. That's what pretty much, I think, what we experienced back in those days.
Well, tell me about your parents. Take as much time as you want. Go anywhere you want.
Yeah, my father was an engineer, and my mother she was a farm girl, and I never knew her working, but my dad worked a variety of engineering jobs, finally winding up with McDonnell Douglas.
Mm-hmm.
And he always liked to tinker around and draw things he wanted to build, and he was pretty good at it when he got around to it. So.
Yeah. My mom was a mom, too.
Yeah.
Never worked outside the house, always baking, dinner on the table at 5, doing the laundry.
Yeah.
And, you look back on that, but every single kid in my neighborhood, their parents were like that.
Yeah, and in the neighborhood it was Delwood, Missouri, which is a suburb, basically, of Ferguson.
Yeah.
And it was just a wonderful place. Everything was so large back then, but when you go back and look at it, you can't believe how small it is now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not, I'm talking about the house, the street, the neighborhood, the whole works. I mean, and it's, it's not nearly the neighborhood that it used to be. So.
Yeah. What kind of kid were you? What were you into?
I was into baseball, and just all typical sports, a little soccer. Soccer really wasn't all that big, but I was into baseball. Went to a Catholic school, so everything was very rigid.
Mm-hmm.
And but the neighborhood kids. As soon as I was able to, I started delivering newspapers and making some money off to the side like that. And actually, my dad said, if you want anything, you come up with half the money and I'll come up with the other half. And that's pretty much the way I was taught with money back when I was young.
It sounds like you had good parents.
Yeah, they were good parents. My parents had some rough times together, but growing up like that, myself, my brother, my sister, who came along 10 years earlier,
Mm-hmm.
We all had, I would say, a very, very good life in the 50s and early 60s.
What's the age difference between you and your brother?
2 years.
You older?
I'm older, yes.
Okay.
And
How is that? Were you guys best of friends and enemies?
I don't know that we were enemies that much, but we were best of friends. We did a lot together, play baseball. My gosh, we'd go out in the front yard and throw baseballs for hours.
Yeah.
And we would do a lot, just ride bikes together. We had some of the same friends, but 2 years in age difference is a lot for a kid growing up. So he had his friends, I had mine. But one of the terrific things we had was that while we lived in a Lestron house, which is a metal home, we grew up in the same bedroom, and it was a metal roof. Everything was metal, not a stick of the wood in the house. My father, it was the house of the future. And there's about 40 of them in St. Louis, but only one in North County, which was ours at 25 South Delwood. So it was really exciting to be in that house during a sleet storm or something. I mean, it sounded like you were in a war movie, and so we had a lot of fun with that. And we helped our father build a large building next to the house that turned out to be like a playroom and a garage and big fireplace in there. Workshop, all that kind of stuff. So it was a great place to put up. We put up a pool table, I think, and a ping pong table. Played a lot of ping pong and a lot of cards.
That's very cool.
Nickel dime cards, and that was going on. My brother was much better at that than I was.
You were talking about playing catch. Just yesterday on the show, I was talking about if I could go back and spend a day as a kid, I think I would spend it playing catch with my buddies.
Yeah.
There was nothing more meditative. You could do it for hours. You talk about girls, you talk about what, just the status of your life. I really, really miss that.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. And we had a home plate and we had little pitcher's, not a mound, but a spot. And my brother was a pitcher and infielder. And I always wanted to be a pitcher, but I never could make it. When I finally did, I lost like 20-0 or something like that. But that's what we would do is throw balls to one another all the time.
And I bet if you went back there now, even though everything's changed, you could show me this is where home base was. This is where,
Exactly. Yep. I could do that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tell me about your relationship with your sister.
Very good. So I still talk to her. She lives in California. She's was in the movie industry for a long time. Now she's 10 years younger than me, so she is teaching. She's a substitute, not a substitute. Well, she teaches at a school as a substitute sometimes, but she's working with a lot of underprivileged kids, teaching them and things of that nature. But
yeah.
She's single, although she's been in a relationship for 40 years.
Wow.
And rather noted person that I won't mention his name at the moment. But
that's very cool.
So she is she's a terrific person, and she is a survivor and has managed to figure out a way to live in California almost since I think she was in her early or mid-20s when she moved out there.
It sounds like your parents raised outside-the-box thinkers.
Yes.
You and your siblings.
Yes. Yeah, my brother, I never went in the service. My brother went in the Marines in Vietnam, became a sniper in Vietnam. It was, I would get letters from him that were just, shocking. And fortunately, he made it home, and he made it home well.
Good.
And living near Naples, Florida right now with he and his wife and enjoying the Florida life.
Good. I mean, it sounds like a very successful life. I know you've had ups and downs.
Yeah.
But the bones of it,
yes,
from childhood all the way through, siblings, everyone gets along, everyone's done well. Good for you.
Yes, that's what I think that makes the character of a person and allows them to get through a lot. Yeah, we've had a lot of ups and downs, but it allows you to get through a lot.
Yeah. So you grew up Catholic. I did not, but once I came to St. Louis, everyone was Catholic. So, my daughter's Catholic, and so I kind of get the deal. Tell me about that. What was it like growing up Catholic in the 50s?
Wow. Well, you would go to church. So I went to St. John and James and then St. Sebastian's grade schools, and then Corpus Christi High School in Jennings. So church, really got tired of going to church. and I did, and confession, which was always kind of funny because it only really lasted. You go to confession on Fridays, and you realize on Monday you have to go back again. So, but growing up, all my friends were Catholic.
Yeah.
They did not necessarily go to a Catholic school, but I think everybody I knew was Catholic where we lived, and so you grow up. That becomes an integral part of your person, and whether or not you're a full-blown practicing Catholic, that stays with you, and it has a lot to do with, I think, how you develop as a person.
Some of my buddies who are my age and your age tell stories about how rough the priests, the brothers, the nuns could be on you. Did you have that in your childhood?
I think we had that in the grade school. But once you, so some of my grade school teachers, while I was in a Catholic school, were lay teachers. I didn't really. I mean, I maybe got my knuckles rapped a couple times by a ruler, but there were other kids in the class that got it. They had it going all the time.
And a lot of my friends, not just Catholic, but all religions, but especially Catholic, it continues to be a part of their life, but not like it was when they were a kid. Did you remain pretty devout, or was it something that did you raise your kids Catholic as well?
I didn't. I wasn't really devout. Once I got in my 20s, I stopped going to church on Sundays. Before that, it was every Sunday, and I didn't. By that time, I had a family, and I was going to college at night. I had a job, and it was more. It was just inconvenient for me. But I never lost the faith. And my kids, I allowed my kids to choose what they wanted. So I got two of my children are Catholic, and they chose that, and my other daughter is very religious, but she chose her own path on that.
Yeah,
and and my wife is Catholic, but she's praying she prays all the time, but we do not go to church or anything. We went to a midnight mass very early in our relationship, and that's a whole nother story. But I think that was the only time we were really at a mass together.
So
other than a wedding,
kind of jumping ahead here, but what you said intrigued me. The way you raised your kids, you said let them, figure it out themselves and make their own decisions.
Right?
Was that intentionally the way that your parents raised you, or do you think that it just carried over to the next generation?
No, my first wife was not. She was. She would say she was Baptist. So I didn't really want to create a conflict, but she was not. I would say she was not going to church every Sunday or anything like that.
Yeah.
But then, so I just decided to kind of allow my kids to choose their own path. And if I was a good parent and showed them the way, maybe they would be Catholic. But I didn't think that would determine their happiness in life.
So growing up, what did you envision as far as a family? Did you think, I want the traditional. I want to get married. I want to have kids. I want the nuclear family. The more kids, the better. Like, what was your mindset going into adulthood?
Yeah, interesting. My parents had a lot of tough times. My parents eventually got divorced, and both got remarried. But they had a very rough, I would say from the time I was 12 years of age or 13 on, there was a lot of trouble in my parents' marriage. So,
and were you guys aware of it?
Oh yeah, I was. It affected, I think, my sister more than anybody. So my brother went in the Marines when he could, and the Marines were not in my future, believe me. Certainly not during Vietnam.
Mm.
So I had decided that I wanted a successful family, and that was the most important thing to me. And again, it was like I wanted to leave it to Beaver, although I don't think it was on TV at the time, but I wanted to leave it to Beaver family. I wanted the perfect family. And when things started to get rough for us, I was bound and determined to make sure that it was that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was challenging, very, very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And the 70s were a very hard 10 years for me, but my two daughters who were with me at the time, it was through their strength as little children to kind of pull me through that. And then the 80s were pretty good, except for the end of the 80s when my wife and I finally got divorced for the final time. And even though, I mean, that was inevitable. So that was going to happen at some point, but it was like, I think at 89 when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I've been so gratified in my life to know that each of my children's families, I mean, I've got 8 grandkids, and their families, each of my daughter's families and my son's family, they married well, and their kids are phenomenal, and I'm proud of every single one of them. And they had the family that I guess I would have liked to have had.
Wow.
So that's pretty good.
Yeah. Tell me more about that during the 70s when things were rough for you, and you said your kids kind of got you through it. Tell me more about that.
Well, yeah, it was really, really tough. It was, maybe I don't want to dwell on that a lot,
No, that's
except
fine.
that I was I was in court a lot, and good things happen in court, I was kind of rare as a man for that to happen in those times. But on the other hand, the most important thing to me at the time were the times I spent with my daughters. My son wasn't born until 79, so my daughters were my strength, and they didn't know it. Maybe I wasn't leaning on them, but just to be with them gave me all the strength in the world. For the next few days until I saw them again.
Yeah.
And eventually it had all turned around and became okay. And I just decided the best way to handle this is to be me.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people in that position try to be things that they aren't, and I couldn't do that. I just decided to be me and show them the best example of a parent I could possibly be.
Yeah, I have 2 kids. My oldest is 28, and his mom and I got divorced when he was just 2.5, and I had no money. I had no money at all.
Yeah.
And he's my best friend to this day because what we went through together. We're like foxhole buddies.
Right.
So you can probably relate to that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the other thing that I had, I just now thought of it, was I was working for a guy, Frank Block, in the advertising business, and I had his support. So without his support, I didn't have any danger of losing a job at all, and I loved my work, and he knew it, and he supported me.
Let's talk about your work again. Going back to childhood, teenage years, did you have a pretty good idea of what you wanted to do?
No. Had no idea. I thought because all my friends were becoming accountants that's what I had to do. So when I graduated from high school, I had no money. It was a Friday, and I think the graduation ceremony was on Saturday. And the previous week, my mother put me in the car and drove me over to my uncle's business, which was Bardall Oil Company on Natural Bridge Road. And she basically told him, Irv, give him a job. So on Monday, I went to work for my uncle it wasn't really my uncle, but I think he was my second cousin or something like that, but I was always Uncle Irv. So he gave me a job, and he was very wealthy and had a very successful business until the IRS got a hold of him. and
Uncle Irv.
yeah, right. And
We've all got an Uncle Irv.
but I had always, from the time I was 14 or 15, I always had jobs. I was working at a bicycle shop, a delicatessen, a variety of different bowling alley, and I had all these different jobs. So I was making money, and that was infectious to me. But when I graduated from high school, all my friends, I really got serious about what am I going to do in life, and I decided to go to college. I had no money. The only college in town was WashU and St. Louis U at the time in '61. So I went to my mom, who had just had a small inheritance from my grandfather, and I asked her to give me $125 to put down on night school, three nights a week. And she did. She didn't have any hesitation about it, but throughout her entire life until she passed away, she always insisted that she put me through college. But after that, first $125 I paid for every nickel of my college at night school. So I eventually...
Where did you go?
I go to St. Louis U.
Okay.
I went to St. Louis University, and I wanted to be an accountant, and I had jobs early on as an accountant, but I just really didn't like that. And so when I decided to go into marketing, I still have 12 hours left off to the side someplace. And at night school, that's almost a year and a half. I mean, it's a semester. That's a full semester. So I I switched my major and went through marketing, eventually got my first degree in '67, I think, bachelor's in '73, and master's in '77. So it was something that I was bound and determined to get a college degree. I was the only one I think I was the first one. My father, he went to WashU, but he had gotten an associate's degree. So I was the first one to get a bachelor's degree in the family. And that, I just knew once I had that, I had back then I had something. I think nowadays it's not quite as important, but I had something. And that gave me a license to move on from there. I was never a great student until I got into graduate school. I mean, I got straight A's there, but up until that time, every grade was tough for me, and I didn't spend a lot of time doing it.
Boy, we have a lot. We have a lot in common. I was the same way.
Yeah.
I thought I had functional disabilities. I just didn't care about school at all. And then in college, something caught fire, and once I cared about it, like you,
right? Yeah.
Then there was no stopping me.
Yeah.
But if I didn't care about something, I just didn't.
That's exactly. And I in the questionnaire, I remember. There was a question about what did you learn in life, and I remember Frank Block, who I worked for nearly 10 years. Frank would pull me in his office about once or twice a week or thereabouts, and he'd say, "Muenz, if you ever get off your ass, you're going to be successful." And that was him, but that was the way he talked and everything else, and he motivated you by humor and making fun of you and pushing you and all that, but he was exactly right. I could not, if I was interested in something, get out of my way. You know, but school was not interesting to me.
Yeah. So tell me about your career, whatever you want to tell me. You start where you want, finish where you want. I just want to hear about, we've talked a little bit about recently that you worked as an expert witness.
Right.
And I talked about that I was a lawyer. I know about the expert witness thing, but just decades long. Tell me what you want.
I was in I think it was 90, I mean, not 90, I'm sorry. It was in 64. So I was working for Archer Paper Company as a junior accountant, and they were in financial trouble. So they let everybody off, and they gave me a week's severance. And on Sunday, back then, the way you got a job was to look at the Sunday newspaper. And Sunday, I saw this ad in there from McGraw-Hill Publications as a news reporter. And I go, oh, that'd be fascinating. I'm sick of this accounting stuff. So I did my resume on Sunday. On Monday morning, their office was on West Pine Boulevard. I was at the front door when they opened the door with my resume. Most people would send them in, but I delivered it. And by Friday, I had a job, and I started working the following Monday. So I've never had a day, and from the time I was 18 years old to the time I retired, that I was without a job, so to speak. And I loved that job. It allowed me to get out and talk to people, and architects basically is who I talked to. And I got promoted to New York City with them. And I'd never been on a plane, never been in New York City. And all of a sudden, my wife and I are living in New York, and we lived in the city for a while until the house we rented on Long Island was available. But again, after working there for another year, I realized their management program had me roaming around the country every 2 or 3 years, and I didn't want that. And I wanted to complete my education, so we moved back to St. Louis at McGraw-Hill. Continued. I was a supervisor. I managed 2 offices up in New York for news reporters like myself. So I had about 10 or 12 people under me, and I was very young for doing that. Everybody was old enough to be my grandmother or grandfather that I managed. And I didn't have much to do during the day. I started reading the Wall Street Journal. I mean, literally cover to cover. So when I got back to St. Louis, I continued to work for McGraw-Hill in another capacity until I found a advertising sales job at R.L. Polk Company, and I was with them for a couple of years. And then I was calling on Frank Block Associates Advertising, selling them some direct mail programs, and they asked me to interview. I did, and I got a job there as an account executive, and then was promoted shortly to VP in about 2 years, and then I was a senior guy there, and when I started my business in '79. But the most important thing, I think, when in the late '60s, I took a Dale Carnegie course, 2 of them actually, and in one of them they had this little card you fill out. I have the card here actually, and the reason I want to show this is 1968. So it's my goal in life, and you write down your goal and when you want to achieve it and how you want to go about it and the dates. You put dates down. And by the time I was 35 years old, according to this, I wanted my own business. Well, in '79, I started freaking out because I was just getting ready to turn 35, and I figured out a way to start my own business. And this card has been with me ever since that, 68, whatever, how many ever years that is. And that has helped guide me through my life because I'm a very goal-oriented person. And I truly believe that what this did was subliminally kept me on my track. And so when I started my business, I had no money. It was a guy who was retiring that had this business, and I didn't even hardly know what it was. But I talked him into having me pay him off over a 10-year period on the money that I earned. So we did that, and the manufacturer's rep represents, in this case, consumer products that you sell to retailers. So I had 4.5 states: Missouri, Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, and the southern 2/3 of Illinois. And on March 1st of 1979, I started the business and started traveling to all those states. My wife was pregnant, I learned she was pregnant a couple months later, and my son was born later that year.
First child?
No, this is my son.
Gotcha. Yes.
My third child.
2 daughters are older.
Yeah, and my daughters were 10 years old and 12 years old, I think, yeah. And so I figured a young guy with enthusiasm and no knowledge of the business he just took over could be successful at it. And during the second or third trip, I made my first sale, and it was $1,700. And that guy that I sold, he was up in Quincy, Illinois. My very first order, I still see him. Jim Jones is his name. He lives in St. Louis now, and a bunch of us guys that grew up in the business get together for lunch once a year, and I still see Jim all the time. And he always reminds me of how successful he was in making me a success. So about a year or two later, I joined up with a guy out of Kansas City, because in my business you needed 3 offices: Missouri, Kansas City, St. Louis, Kansas City, and Omaha. And I continued the majority interest in the business. And then about a year later, we opened a 3rd office in Omaha. And then when the 80s hit, we just started growing like crazy. We got Bissell, Clairol, Conair, Remington, Cuisinart, Weber Barbecue Grills. I mean, Sunbeam, we were the young up-and-coming company, and we started adding every couple of months a big client. And the business was very successful and continued that way. And we eventually had as many as, I think, 30 employees at one time in the offices. And then we took on another business service company that went in the stores and rearranged shelves with the products we had and all that.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah.
I'm so fascinated by this. When you were doing that, were you kind of creating a new business? Had people done your kind of thing in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and you just took it from there and you enhanced it? Or were you guys kind of making it up as you go? Because the 80s and 90s were big boom decades for products.
No, this was an industry, and this was the way. There were a lot of competitors, but because of doing the same thing we were doing. So there was always a fight for who you're going to represent. So like Bissell, for instance, we got in 1981, we had to compete with several other rep companies for it. They're still a client. My company still exists, and they're still a client, as is Conair. Cuisinart was my biggest for many years. I mean, a lot of these people, if these companies haven't been bought out, most of the big names, and that's what we became known for, are still clients of my succeeding company.
Amazing.
It's amazing, really. For Bissell, I just heard from the executive VP there a couple of days ago, and he was celebrating an work anniversary, and I sent him a note, and he sent me a note back. And for 1981, it's what is that, 43 years or whatever. So it was really amazing. But where the creative comes in is that in the early to mid 90s, the devil in our business at the time was Walmart, because they were just growing leaps and bounds and swallowing everybody up. So we had to contend with that. And in the early 90s, they started, our retailers started going out of business, and venture started having a lot of trouble. That was our biggest, third of our business was what I managed at venture stores. And so some of those buyers I became very close to, and they were being hired by Walmart, and they started telling me, "Hey, Bob, why don't you come down here and start selling us? I mean, we'll allow you." At the time, Walmart, the word on the street was they didn't like reps, because we added to the cost of the product, which we didn't do. In reality, they were really looking for good reps that really brought them value. So these buyers who I work with recognized us to be that, and so I started as a sideline, starting to go down to Walmart, and eventually in doing that, and so that's where all my competitors were not doing that. When venture went out of business, they went out of business. I was really the only one of probably 15 people in our area, our businesses, like doing what we did, and to survive. We survived by taking on, the giant killer. And it's pretty interesting, because I think it was 97 when venture eventually went totally out of business. That was our biggest year ever. And because of the business we were doing at Walmart and Sam's Club and Costco too. Costco's up in Washington. I eventually got to the point I just couldn't make the trip up there. So I had and the people at Walmart sort of said, "Hey, Bob, you need to choose something here." So I said, "I'll choose you. You're closer." So anyhow, so that's my business back then. In the early '90s, I bought out my partner, and then I sold the business a year and a half, 2 years later, to the younger partners, and they continue on with the business. I mean, it's nowhere. It's a shadow of what it used to be, because you don't have any large retailers here anymore. But and I spun off Retail Works, which was the division that which was my office down in Arkansas.
Yeah.
And that I continued up until the time I retired.
So as someone who just met you an hour ago and listening to your story, we kind of shared this as well. I picture you, a frog jumping from lily pad to lily pad, and you seem to have hit the right lily pads.
Yeah.
Family, kids, your career, certainly. Weird question, but you're going to get it. When you look back at that, let's just talk about your career for a moment. How much of hitting the right lily pad do you attribute to smarts? You're obviously a smart guy. Hard work. You just outworked people, and luck. How would you break that down?
Well, luck has something to do with it, but it's recognizing the problems you have, I think, and then seeking out the opportunities. There's always two ways to do something. And my dad being an engineer, he always told me, he said, you'll never be without a job if you're a salesman. And that didn't mean anything to me at the time, but it's right, because as a salesman, you're successful when you sell, when you complete a sale. So people, and my wife was one of them, she doesn't understand, but you do all this work and you don't get paid. I do get paid. I get paid on commissions, and the commission floats all over the place. Mm-hmm. So most of the people in my business always lived month to month. Mm-hmm. What I did, I had 6 weeks of commission checks in my center drawer in my desk underneath the tray. So I was always 4 to 6 weeks late in cashing a commission check. So I always had a cushion for the month. And when you have so many people's payroll, and I had a payroll. I paid people a specific amount every month, plus a bonus. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, that was what I learned from Frank Block. And I was on commission there, too. I was on a salary plus commission. So you give them enough money to live on, and then you give them extra if they exceed what their goals are. So that is very hard for some people. In my business, when Venture Stores went out of business, people didn't have anything to fall back on. I did. And what I had learned to do in my whole life was to bob and weave. And so you're talking about being creative. So I was creative in figuring out a way to go to Bentonville 2 weeks of the year, and Venture Stores would call. They said, "Hey, is Bob around?" No, he's not, but I was down in Arkansas selling my brains out, and knowing that the opportunities, you see an opportunity and you figure out a way to get it. If you can't, another one of my father's sayings was, if you can't lower the water, you raise a bridge. So you figure out a way to do it. There's always ways to do it. So
you were always able to see the field.
Yeah.
You always had a good view and could kind of see things before other people saw them, or
being pushed into them and just taking advantage of it. And that's where luck comes in, I think. If you don't see that. There's some of the guys I told you that we get together with, their companies went out of business and they went to work for other companies, and their dream of being in business for themselves was gone. Mine wasn't. I never wanted to. Once I started the business, I never wanted to work for anybody else in my life.
Yeah. So let's talk about some fun stuff. I know you're a golfer, and I see that you have been going to the Ozarks since 1975.
Yes,
that was a different place.
Oh yeah. So
it was rough back then.
So when our family was in trouble in the 70s, I got some money as a bonus, and I thought to myself, So the best way to keep the family together was to find was to go on a weekend and put all of us in a small spot at one time. So I bought a small boat. I bought a 22-foot boat, and we went to the Ozarks, and we were stuck on that boat for the entire weekend, 3 weekends a month. And it didn't work. But it did work for most of us, but it didn't keep the marriage together. But eventually the marriage, So, the old saying is when you buy a boat, you're looking to buy a bigger boat. And eventually I kept buying bigger boats. And the only time I had to borrow money to make a payroll, I put my new boat down as collateral for it, which I knew I would be able to pay the loan off in 30 days, which I did. So boating, I've always believed in 3 things, your family, your job, and your passion, and your recreation. You got to balance those. You got to balance your life in that way, and that's what I try to do. So I tried to have some fun with my life to make up for some of the bad times. And Lake of the Ozarks, you're right, it was a totally different place at the time. We go out, we drop an anchor, we'd sit there with, other families, and sometimes we'd have 8, 10, 12 boats tied up at once. We'd be there the whole weekend, and the kids, it was such a great place for the kids to grow up. But things change, and your life goes through different stages. So by the time, and my wife actually loved it, but I have arthritis, and I just couldn't. It's work, physical work, and so around 2002 or so, we were getting ready to move to we moved to St. Albans in 2004, I think, and I decided to take up golf and put the lake behind me. The kids had their own families and everything, so it made a lot of sense. So, but I loved it. The 25 years. The saying where, the best day of your life is when you buy a boat, when you sell it. Not me. I loved boating. I'd still go back and do it if I could, but it's not in me right now. So
what over your life have been some of your other passions, whether it's with the kids, with your wife, or just you? What are some of the things that if you died today and angels are there and they said, like, hey, Bob, tell me the stuff you really, really loved outside of the kids, outside of your job. What about Earth did you love? What would you say?
Well, as a kid growing up, I spent summers down on the farm in Perryville, Missouri, with my grandpa Morgan. He passed away when I was 16, but my brother and I would spend summers down there. I loved that. Worked, baling hay and crap like that. I mean, I loved it. I loved being a Boy Scout, Cub Scout, all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned my children, but the birth of my children, that was kind of fun. Just looking at my kids and their families, I'm just so proud of everything that is happening with them. I'm watching. I finally have the time. My grandson, who's 17, is a AAA hockey player, and I go to as many of his games as I can. I didn't have the time to do that before, and I feel a little bit guilty about missing a lot of my grandkids' things. I watched a few of their sports and all that. My granddaughter was a scholarship student for field hockey at St. Joe's and went on to the University of Louisville, and I saw a couple of her games, but I'm trying to make up for it as much as possible with my 17-year-old grandson and his sister who plays soccer. So I really enjoy that.
Let me stop you there and ask, because it's a good time to ask it. So I've only known you for an hour, and when I leave this and someone asks me what I did, I'll tell them you've had a really successful life in every possible measure. Not regrets so much, and you can deep ones or little ones. I don't care. But if your grandkids who will watch this, if your grandkids were sitting here right now, starting out their own lives, you look back at your life, and even though you did very well, what would you tell them? Like, you know what? I wish I would have done this different. Or if you get this opportunity, learn from my mistake or mistakes and do this instead of that. Anything like that that comes to mind right away?
Interesting you asked that question. I have so much confidence in my children, my 3 children, for them to guide my grandkids properly. That is one of the most. They don't need my help.
Wow.
They really don't. I mean, that's. I don't want to interfere. They're doing a great job. I mean, they're doing an awesome job. Every one of my grandkids, I'm so proud of. I just had my first great grandchild, which are children, identical twin girls.
Wow!
And isn't that cool? They're 2 months old, so I got to see them and hold them and everything, and that blew me away. But I don't. My grandchildren are learning all the right things from my kids.
Yeah.
And their parents, I would say. And when I say my kids, I'm talking about my daughter and her husband, and my son and his wife. So I feel, I mean, for the comfort and what's the word I'm trying to think of? For the comfort of knowing that, I feel so relaxed, I guess, and successful in life. I mean, that's in my whole life, you know, for my kids to be able to do that.
What else you want to do?
Well, I just wrote a book. I never thought I would write a book, but I always thought that I had that in me. So I live in St. Albans, beautiful place. I don't know if you've ever been there, but we've been there for 20 years. I played golf, and about 15 years ago, on one of the courses I'm playing, there's a headstone there, and I got to look at the headstone. It was Nicholas Bruckner. I wrote down his name. I thought, I wonder what that. Turns out the guy was a Civil War vet and all that. So there are 5 cemeteries along this particular golf course, and so I started to get into it, and I really started to get fascinated with the history of St. Albans, which has an enormous amount of history in it, from Lewis and Clark, and even before that, all the way up.
Didn't know that.
Just phenomenal. So I decided about 5 years ago, by the time I retired, I started dabbling. I'm not a history person. History was the most boring subject in the world to me in school. So I decided to learn as much as I can about it. And along the way, when you're doing a book and you're starting at the beginning, in 1804 up till basically 30 or 40 years ago, you have I was able to get a hold of a lot of pictures, but visually I couldn't accomplish what I wanted to. So there's artists, nationally renowned artists in Franklin County. Brian Haynes' brother Michael, and a guy named Gary Lucy, and another guy who's passed away many years ago. So I went to them and I asked them if they would allow me to use some of their paintings in my book. And so because they painted St. Albans. One of them was known for landscapes, the other for historical people, the other for steamships and older ships. So I managed to put together about 15 of those in the book. But that isn't all that does is tell a story through pictures that my words can't describe. So I put this book together, and I found out a lot of fascinating things. I mean, we had murders, we had kidnappings, we had rich people, and we had all different kinds of things in the community that started basically in 1837. So that, and we printed the book, and I got a couple of my buddies who put some money behind it, and the Country Club of St. Albans got behind it. And so we printed 500 copies, and it came out in August. So we have about 30 copies left now. So, it's been very successful, and I've had a lot of new information come forward since I published this, or we published it, and it's that was very satisfying.
Have you thought about taking on another similar project?
I'm still doing some research, but I don't want it to go on the record. But
Yeah.
but the guy who founded Dr. Peter Kincaid is a fascinating guy to me. He had a very, very interesting life. It started. He was a surgeon in Scotland and fought for the Duke of Wellington against Napoleon in the Napoleonic Wars, and came here and he founded St. Albans, and so he had several wives along the way, all that were young enough to be his children. So it's a fascinating life, and that's why I'm going to make a stop at the library on my way home soon.
Speaking of wives, did I read your notes correctly that you met your wife on September 11th?
You did, yes. That was one of the greatest days. I mean, not really, but I mean, it was a strange thing. So our being single, I always try to get people to set me up. So the lady that cuts my hair kept after me about this lady that she knew. She says she's 10 years younger than you, and and so forth and so on. And the name was sort of familiar. And so she said, well, I finally got tired of her making these suggestions every time I got my hair cut. So I said, well, okay, give her a call and tell her I'll call her if she wants. So I did. It was a Thursday, and we set up to get together at Rick's Cafe American.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that?
I do.
Yeah, on Tuesday. So when September 11th, all the activities happened in the morning. We had no way of getting in touch with one another. And I just decided, I'll meet her there. If she's there, fine. If not, and we met at 7:00 and never been apart since. And
Wow.
she's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
And you were in your early 60s then, or late 50s?
It was, yeah. So that's,
Yeah.
something, I mean,
Yeah.
not that it would happen to others, but that was a big turning point in my life. I mean, to live 60 years and finally find the person that makes you very happy and takes care of you and everything else.
So before we started rolling the cameras, you're 80. I will turn 60 this year, and you made a point of saying 60. Yeah, 60 is a thing.
Yeah.
What was 60 for you?
Well, it was. I just knew that if I'm not on the way to accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish, I better get my ass going. Like Frank Block used to say, Muenz, if you ever get serious about it, you'll be successful. And so I knew that was a stage, one of the stages that you hit in life. So you better decide what you're going to do about the rest of your life. And so I just got a lot more serious and purposeful about my life. And I had been single, and I had been for some time, not all that long, but I probably I needed to tone myself down a little bit, and meeting Jerry was a big deal. She's the best person I've ever known, and she keeps me laughing all the time. I mean, she would say she doesn't have a sense of humor, but she doesn't have to try. She just continues being herself, and I laugh at her all the time. I thank her every day for being who she is. She has a prayer list, and she has, I'll say I got a friend who's going through a rough time. Can you add him to your prayer list? And she goes, yeah, sure. So I don't do the praying. She does the praying.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably not right, but yeah. So that was a big time, and so it was a bittersweet day. It was a terrible day for the country, but it was a wonderful day for me. And we walked out to the car, had a little kiss, met the following week, and
that was it.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about? Well, while we have time.
Well, you had so one of the questions was how do you feel the world has changed, and all that. And I'll use something that I said before. When I was growing up, the worst it got was Leave It to Beaver.
Yeah.
And I really, history, I'm a big believer in history repeating itself. So right now, this world and this country, I think, is at a very precarious position. And we're basically experiencing, I think, what this country did in the 30s, ignoring all the things that are going on in the world, and nobody having the backbone or the balls to do anything about it. And it's going to have to take something big, some catastrophic event of some sort, like Pearl Harbor or something like that, to wake us up. But Pearl Harbor won't be Pearl Harbor again. It'll be something way more serious than that. But I just hope something happens. This country is the moral compass of the world, and right now we're lost in a forest of wokeness. And I wanted to.
Where do you think we went wrong?
Oh, I think it's very gradual. I just think it's just becoming too things that aren't real, paying a lot of attention to things that aren't real. I mean, and people not paying attention to really what they're voting for or anything like that. I mean, I think if you go out, I don't think there's 20% of the people could tell you anything more than a sentence about who they're going to vote for.
Yeah.
And what they stand for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just it's scary, but I think it's always been that way. Actually, when you look back, and I'm reading books on historical figures in Jefferson and some of the presidents back around the start of this country. It's the same thing, except that we didn't have the media. See, where we went wrong was something we can't do anything about, and that is media. Mm-hmm. That's the media has taken over the airwaves. We talked briefly about social media. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, that's horrible. I mean, making a video of punching somebody in the face or something like that and putting it on the air. I mean, how bad can you be? Mm-hmm. And just now we're paying so much attention to the pronoun or whatever it is. When I grew up, boys became men, girls became women. And nowadays, you don't know what they are. If you guess wrong, you get admonished or you get sued. It's really horrible. So when that becomes something that people pay a lot of attention to, that's going in the wrong direction. See, that's really so wrong. And people that live in this country, they don't really realize how good of a country it is. We are the conscience of the world, and it's and we need to continue that. If we don't, who else is going to do it? And the other thing I think that's kind of interesting is that there's all this focus on destroying the earth. We're not going to destroy the earth. I mean, the earth has been around for billions and billions and billions of years. So what we're going through right now, for crying out loud, we've gone through it for billions of years. We're going to destroy each other before we destroy the earth.
Planet's going to be fine.
Yeah, the planet's going to be fine. And I read this book. It's not even a book on that subject. It's a book on the dinosaurs. See, when you read the book on the dinosaurs, and I've read a couple of those books, and you realize, I mean, the dinosaurs were destroyed. They didn't destroy themselves, or sort of, but the earth bounced back. The earth is going to do just fine. But here's the thing: in 100 years, we're going to be on other planets. We're going to be populating other planets, and we're going to be moving around the solar system. And I truly believe that. And the technology and all that's happening right now. I don't know if there's life on other planets, but we're going to find out fairly soon. And if we really have a problem, we can. I mean, it's simplistic to say, well, just go to Mars or someplace like that. But I believe I've read a lot about SpaceX, and Mr. Musk just finished his book, phenomenal. I learned more about technology and engineering and all that kind of stuff, and by reading the book. He's an interesting character. But SpaceX can be the way out for us. And,
are you jealous of your grandkids? Not in a negative way, of course, but are you jealous of your grandkids in what they're going to see in their lives?
No, I'm frightened for them. Yeah. I'm frightened for them. They're all really good people. Like I told you, I just somehow we got to get out of this mess that we are in. And I'm talking about we, country, and the world. The world, you know, I mean, there's always been bad people, evil people, and there's always been good people, and good trumps over evil. I believe. I'm an optimist by nature, and I always see. It's funny. I see the bright side of things. My wife sees the negative side of things, but she calls it reality. That's not negative. That's being realistic. I go, you're right. I guess she is, but I always feel that there's that the bright side of things will happen and the good will trump evil, and eventually that has to happen. And there's so many different things going on in the world right now but
maybe the difference is that in the past people were doing things to us. Japan, invaded Pearl Harbor, and Hitler was trying to take over the world.
Yeah.
And in the last 20 years or so, it's been this perfect storm of us doing it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the difference.
It is, but the other thing is that back then, sometimes we didn't know about things until a reasonable amount of time went by. But now we know about them instantly. So I'm reading this book on Ben Franklin. So Ben Franklin, they would print a newspaper once a week, and it was all about the news that happened last week. But the people would get the newspaper to follow it. So everything they were reading about, if it was news, it happened 2-3 weeks ago. So now it's seconds. If like I kind of get on Twitter every now and then, I look at the timeline. Sometimes it's 2 minutes. So this is the stuff that is scary, because if everybody turned off, if we lost all of our news channels and everything for a week, I think everybody would like it so much that they would want it to be. They would want the same thing to happen, all except for Camo X. Incidentally, I mean,
no, I'm in the media, and I agree with you.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more.
It's absolutely scary. It really is.
But let me finish with this. And I asked you a question sort of like this a few minutes ago about your grandkids, and you said that you're so confident in your kids and their parenting that you're very comfortable and you stay out of it. But your grandkids will have this tape we're making forever. When they're 50, 60 years old, they look back and they want to see their grandpa. They're going to go through so many things in their life. Work things, family things, their own kids, their own grandkids. What advice would you give them sitting here today, January 23rd, 2024, and it could be 60 years from now that they watch this?
Well, it's a good lead-in to this, to the answers I wrote down, because I believe in these. I believe in this. With Dale Carnegie, I don't know that I have the answer, but I'll rely on some people who are a lot smarter than me, okay? Dale Carnegie said, sit down and plan out your goals. Martin Luther King said, judge not on the color of people, but judge on their character. I mean, what better advice can you ever get in your life than that? Now, Frank Block said, Muenz, if you ever want to be successful, get up off your ass. And Frank wasn't known by many people, but he was revered by me, and he supported me in a lot of different ways. Spike Lee and Mark Twain both said, do the right thing. Now, Mark Twain said it differently. Before Spike Lee, he said, it's never wrong to do the right thing, which if you come to the fork in the road, you don't do what Yogi Berra did, which was you take it. And when you come to a fork in the road, you do the right thing. And that's you can't go wrong by doing the right thing. Forrest Gump, the other thing is you can't fix, dumb. We recognize people we should not be around. And my advice is not only don't be around them, but stay not around them. I mean, get the hell away from them, and don't let those are toxic people, and keep them out of your life. But and for those who want to go into business or think about business, I had a chance of meeting in the late '60s with Mark McKee, who was chairman of the board of Pan Am Airlines. He came to St. Louis to visit some relatives. He came into my office. I was the only one there, and he was asking me about some direct mail programs. And I realized, after asking him some questions, about who he was, he had an annual report in his hand. He turned it over, and there was a picture of the board of directors of Pan Am Airlines, and there he was standing in the center, and they were all sitting. I go, shit, this guy's really something. So I really got to listen to him, and I just was enamored with what he was asking about, but I was more interested in what advice he could give me. So I asked him if we could have dinner that night. He was at a hotel, and he said, sure. He said, yeah. He was like, must have been close to 80, I guess, at the time. So I went to have dinner with him, and so I asked him, and I wrote it down, and this has guided me, my life, really. I said, so how can you be successful? Give me some rules. He said, well, I got 5. He said, I've lived them my life. To begin with, whatever you do, it's got to be an opportunity for everybody. Not only the people that you involve, but the people so that there has to be an opportunity. It's got to be a challenge. If it's not a challenge, you're not going to like it. And it's got to be profitable, because if it's profitable, it'll allow you to keep doing it. And he said, you got to get good people involved. And I pride myself in the people I hired for my business. Really never, I don't think, we had 1 or 2 guys in all those years resign. All the other people stayed with me. And that's not only, that's support people as well as junior partners and whatever. But he said the final thing is, if it's not fun, don't even think about it. It's got to be fun. You have got to enjoy what you're going to do. You found that out. Mm-hmm. You realized, being a lawyer, well, glad I wish a few million other lawyers would have thought the same thing. You got the hell out of it and got into something you really enjoy. And you really have to have fun with that. So that's the advice I would say. If you just took the last 2 minutes of this clip and listened to it, that's what I would suggest for my grandkids. I just love, and don't forget the people. Don't forget your friends, particularly the ones that have passed away.
Yeah.
I think about them all the time. I had some really good friends, and every one of them left me with 1 or more things to remember. And so.
It's been a pleasure meeting you. I really, an honor to do this.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you do it.
Yeah, it's fun.
I was faced with all different kinds. When Peter sent me the list, I go, and my wife had a suggestion. I go, nope. I'm not into that guy. I said, but this guy I've heard a little bit about. I'm going to listen to him for a couple of weeks and see if he.
I'm glad you picked me.
Yeah,
it's fun. I learned a lot.
I'm glad you were here.
I learned a lot. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.